Something that shouldn't have been there was discovered exactly where history claimed nothing ever existed. Beneath one of the most iconic structures in all of Mexico, an anomaly was revealed that neither scientists nor archaeologists have been able to explain to this day. What began as a routine restoration turned into the gateway to a millennia-old enigma that challenges everything we think we know about our past. From that moment, nothing was the same. What started as an archaeological discovery spiraled into a web of secrets, betrayals, and disturbing findings that threatened to topple the foundations of history. But there's something no one has dared to say out loud. What if we were never the first to walk this land? The monitor flickered 3 times before displaying the first image. Maite Herrera held her breath, her fingers, stained with dirt and sweat, tightening on the edge of the folding table. The inspection camera had just descended into the newly discovered opening beneath the Temple of Kukulkan. That stone colossus, which had guarded its secrets for centuries, stood like an immutable sentinel of time. "Adjust the focus, Carlos," Maite muttered, her eyes glued to the screen where only shadows and dust were visible. The early morning in Chichén Itzá weighed heavily on the small team. The heat, even at that hour, was stifling. Only the privilege of special authorization allowed them to be there, when tourists were asleep, and the ancient Mayan city rested in a silence that seemed to hold 1,000 years of untold history. Suddenly, the image stabilized. Maite leaned forward, and her heart skipped a beat. This can't be," she whispered. On the wall of the newly discovered tunnel, illuminated by the camera's cold light, perfectly preserved glyphs appeared, carved with mathematical precision into the limestone. But among them, like an impossible anomaly, were modern numerical sequences and, most disturbingly, recognizable dates. Carlos, the technician operating the equipment, turned pale. His hand trembled on the camera controls. "Dr. Herrera, that's a year." Maite didn't respond. Her mind, trained for years to decipher Mayan linguistic patterns, refused to process what she saw. One of the symbols clearly displayed 2025 in a sequence no Mayan from the classic period could have carved. "Extract the camera," she ordered, her voice breaking. "We're going in." 20 minutes later, Maite descended through the narrow opening. The makeshift metal ladder creaked under her weight. The beam of her headlamp sliced through the darkness like a scalpel, revealing a narrow passageway untouched for centuries, or so it should have been. At the bottom, her knees touched the cold floor. Before her, the symbols glowed under the artificial light, sharper and more impossible than ever. It wasn't a camera error. They were real, defying everything she knew about Mesoamerican archaeology. "Pass me the photography equipment," she requested through the intercom, her fingers brushing the stone surface with reverence. A chill ran down her spine. It wasn't just the underground temperature, it was something more. A primal, instinctive feeling of being watched, not by something physical, but as if the place itself was aware of her intrusion. The inscriptions formed a circular pattern around a central glyph representing Kukulkan, the feathered serpent. But intertwined with the traditional symbols were binary sequences, modern geographic coordinates, and future dates. Sweat mingled with tears she couldn't hold back. This violated every principle of archaeology, every theory about pre-Columbian civilizations. It was like finding a smartphone in a sealed pharaonic tomb. "Dr. Herrera, the director from INAR, is on the line," a voice reported from above. "He wants to know what we found." Maite didn't answer immediately. Her gaze had locked onto a particularly elaborate symbol that seemed to hold a warning. The translation formed in her mind almost automatically. "We will return when you forget." 3 hours later, an order came from Merida. The site would be sealed, classified, and the excavation suspended indefinitely. But before the officials arrived, Maite had copied every image onto her personal device. That night, alone in her hotel room in Piste, she zoomed in on the central symbol on her laptop. The blue light of the screen illuminated her tense face as she translated the full sequence. The message was clear, as was the fear now consuming her. "We will return when you forget." And below, in a dialect only a handful of specialists in the world could identify. "Time is not a line. It is a circle that bites itself." 3 days later, Maite stepped off the plane in Mexico City, her hands trembling. The weight of the copied images seemed to burn inside her backpack. She hadn't slept since the tunnel's closure. her thoughts fragmented between scientific disbelief and a primal fear she couldn't name. As she exited the terminal, the megacity greeted her with its usual cacophony, but to her, everything felt distant, as if viewed through fog glass. She took a taxi and, against all professional logic, didn't head to the National Institute of Anthropology and History, INAH. Instead, she gave the driver an address in Koyokan. "Are you sure this is the place, doctor?" the driver asked as they stopped in front of a worn colonial house, almost hidden behind an overgrown bougainvillea. Maite paid without answering. Standing before the faded blue door, she took a deep breath and knocked 3 times. The man who opened the door had a face marked by decades of sun and disillusionment. Dr. Ignacio Vale, a brilliant linguist fallen from grace after a scandal involving forged manuscripts, looked at her with eyes that mixed surprise and resignation. "I knew eventually someone from the Institute would come to mock me in person," he said in a raspy voice. "I'm not from the Institute, Ignacio. I'm coming from Chichén Itzá, and I need you to see something that shouldn't exist." In his dusty study, surrounded by stacked books and yellowed maps, Maite spread out the images. Ignacio examined them in silence, his fingers tracing each symbol with the mechanical precision of someone who had devoted their life to deciphering the indecipherable. "This isn't a forgery," he murmured finally. "It's a hybrid code. Look at this recursive pattern. The Mayans never used this syntactic structure. It's as if someone adapted Mayan symbolic language to a completely different communication system." As they spoke, the afternoon turned into night. Ignacio pulled a manuscript from a chain cabinet, handling it with gloves. "The Montauban Codex, only 3 fragments exist, and this one was declared fraudulent. But look, under the lamp, the symbols on the codex and those from the tunnel formed a complementary pattern, like pieces of a millennia-old puzzle. We need access to the underground archives at the National Museum," Ignacio decided, a spark in his eyes revealing the passionate scholar he once was. "There are obsidian fragments with similar inscriptions, cataloged as cultural anomalies." 2 nights later, a clandestine entry into the museum was made possible by a guard who still respected Ignacio's name. Deep within the building, beyond the exhibition halls, the special archive was under strict governmental control. Among sealed boxes and ancient catalogs, they found a section labeled "Temporal Contradictions," an institutional euphemism for artifacts that defied accepted historical chronology. "Here it is," Ignacio whispered, carefully extracting a metal tray. On a bed of black cloth rested a polished obsidian slab the size of a book. Its dark surface reflected the light like a pool of nocturnal water. The edges bore inscriptions identical to some found in the tunnel. When Maite reached to touch the surface, a sharp pain shot through her palm. She instinctively pulled back and saw with horror a clean cut beginning to bleed. "Impossible!" Ignacio gasped, paling. "The obsidian is protected. There are no exposed edges." Maite pressed a handkerchief to her bleeding palm while staring at the black stone. For a fleeting moment, almost imperceptible, it seemed her blood was being absorbed by the smooth surface. "We need to leave," Ignacio said, his voice breaking. "This piece appears in forbidden texts as the Black Heart of Time." In the exit corridor, Maite felt a chill. Among the museum's shadows, a man in a gray suit watched them expressionlessly. When they turned the corner, he was gone.